Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz just a day after saying the vital shipping lane was completely open. Tehran says the waterway will remain under the strict management and control of the armed forces. It's blamed the ongoing US blockade of Iranian ports, which it has called maritime robbery. A tanker and a container ship have both reported coming under fire since the announcement. Let's speak now to our correspondent, Sepe Saramir, who is in Tehran. Sepe, thanks for joining us. What can you tell us about these latest developments?
You know, everything is very uncertain. There is a lot of uncertainty. The situation is very fast evolving. No one knows what is exactly happening. Yesterday, we had Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi saying that the Strait of Hormuz is completely open. And after a few minutes, we had President Donald Trump saying that it's good, but the naval blockade will continue. That created a lot of anger among some hardliners here in Iran, and also the state TV. I saw in the news ticker myself that the Strait of Hormuz is not open and is still subject to strict conditions that have been imposed by the IRGC. And Ghalibaf said that no, if the blockade continues, we're going to have to close the strait again. And just a few minutes ago, there was a statement from the Iran's Supreme National Security Council that, has, in my opinion, shed some light on the latest situation in the Persian Gulf and particularly the Strait of Hormuz. In the beginning of I tried to summarize this statement. In the beginning of the statement, they have talked about the 10-point proposal that was negotiated in Pakistan, and said there was no, after 21 hours of negotiations, there was no agreement between the parties, and said that about the possibility of future negotiations, it has said further talks are postponed until the U.S. revises its demand. And also it seems that the U.S. has submitted a new proposal via Pakistani mediation, but Iran has not responded yet. About the Strait of Hormuz, it has been mentioned that Iran may temporarily open the strait during the ceasefire period, but it's only open to commercial ships, not U.S. or Israeli or military vessels, and passage requires approval, and it should be through designated routes. So even if the strait is open, it's not open. Even if it was open, yesterday, the vessels that want to pass through this strait should contact IRGC, should coordinate with IRGC. Otherwise, they're going to face problems in the strait. And there was also a security justification in this statement. It has been mentioned that Iran sees traffic through the strait as a national security issue due to U.S. military supply routes. Today, I had the opportunity to talk to a military expert and also political former IRGC commander. He told me that the strait is not open, and as long as the naval blockade continues, the strait will remain closed.
All right, thank you so much for that update from Tehran. That's our correspondent, Sepe Saramir. Let's bring in CGTN's Michael Murillo, who joins me in studio. Michael, it's so uncertain, as Sepe says, but this time yesterday, the strait had been supposedly reopened. You've been monitoring what's been happening. Tell us more.
Yeah, Sally, we've got some data from maritimetraffic.com, essentially a time-lapse showing the activity around the Strait of Hormuz and in the Gulf after the strait was opened. And as you're seeing over there, some activity, but essentially a lot of vessels, a lot of ships and tankers staying in the ports around the strait, very few of them actually venturing into the strait. Just some numbers for you very quickly. We saw about a dozen tankers crossing the strait earlier on Saturday, roughly 5 tankers which were containing liquefied natural gas also approached the strait from Qatar. We're not clear as to whether or not they did actually make that crossing. But just to put it in perspective, about 100 ships crossed the strait per day before the war actually began. So we really are seeing just a fraction of that compared to what was happening before the war. Just some clarity also on what we've seen over the last few hours. British maritime officials receiving a report that Iranian gunboats fired at an oil tanker about 20 nautical miles northeast of Oman. Also that container ship which you mentioned apparently coming under fire earlier on Saturday. Sources saying that both ships turned back without completing the crossing. We are hearing as well that the Iranians are issuing a warning to vessels close to the strait, saying that it is no longer open, essentially saying that they should not try to make that crossing. And also, a bit of context here, Sally, hundreds of ships are waiting in the Gulf. We are getting some information suggesting that roughly 20,000 crew members are on those ships trying to get some sort of safe crossing through the straits, and roughly 25% of the world's oil and 20% of natural gas passes through the Strait of Hormuz on its way to countries around the world.
Of course, Iran says it's closed the strait again because the US blockade of Iranian ports continues. What's Trump been saying?
Well, Trump seems to be on a very different page to the Iranians yesterday, saying that the strait was open and that it was essentially business as usual, calling it a brilliant day in the overall context of this conflict. He addressed supporters at an event held by the lobby group Turning Point USA, saying that the US would get hold of Iran's nuclear dust. What does he mean by nuclear dust? Well, essentially he's talking about Iran's enriched uranium, and he raised some eyebrows by saying that America will actually excavate or dig up enriched uranium, and that it would do it with the help of the Iranians themselves. Now, the uranium has been a sticking point because the US believes that Iran wants a nuclear bomb. Let's take a quick listen to what Trump had to say.
And somebody said, how are we going to get the nuclear dust? We're going to get it by going in with Iran, with lots of excavators, because the B-2s, remember when fake news CNN said, well, maybe obliteration is too strong a word. Obliteration. That's so deep. We need the biggest excavators you can imagine, but we're going to go in together with Iran, we're going to get it, and we're going to take it back home to the USA. Very simple.
Now, Iran has responded to that, saying it will never allow its uranium to be taken out of the country. Officials also saying earlier on Saturday that the president of the US talks too much and often issues contradictory statements. So, very much on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to a solution. Sally?
Thank you so much, Michael Murillo.